Hello, and welcome to this video for configuring SAML for Tableau Server version 8.1. My name is Neelesh Kamkolkar, and I'm a product manager at Tableau Software. In this video, I'm going to walk you through in how to prepare for SAML configuration for your Tableau Server. It's primarily targeted towards Tableau Server administrators. So there's a few things you need ahead of getting ready to configure SAML in Tableau Server. First couple things are a certificate and a key. The certificate has to be a PEM encoded certificate with a .crt extension. And your SAML team or your IT team will know how to get that for you. You'll also need a private key to use for Tableau Server. The private key can be a DSA or an RSA private key, and it has to have a .key extension. Once you have these two, let's walk through quickly how you can configure Tableau Server in the Tableau Server configuration dialog. So what you're seeing here is a Tableau Server configuration dialog that you're probably already very familiar with. We've added a new tab in version 8.1 for SAML configuration. To enable SAML, simply check the box next to Use SAML for single sign-on. Once you've done that, you will need to provide a few configuration items in the dialog here. First is a Tableau Server return URL. Typically, this is the URL for your Tableau Server itself. This is how your users of Tableau Server would access Tableau Server. In cases where you have a proxy in front of Tableau Server, make sure you use the appropriate proxy name or address to get that the users use to access Tableau Server. The SAML entity ID uniquely identifies the Tableau Server to your identity provider. And the SAML certificate and the key are what we just talked about, that you have to obtain either from your IT department or use a self-signed certificate key. Once you've entered those fields in the appropriate locations, what you're going to do is export the metadata file. This metadata file describes metadata about Tableau Server and its certificate and the key to the identity provider. Typically at this point in the process, you would provide the metadata file that you've just exported to the SAML engineering team. Depending on the identity provider, the SAML engineers will configure the identity provider as appropriate. Once they've done that, in some cases, the SAML engineering team can turn around and potentially export a metadata file from the IDP that you will then need to import into SAML. If your SAML engineering team provides you with an IDP metadata file, you will need to provide that particular, so bring that metadata file, save it on your Tableau Server, and then bring that in to the Tableau Server configuration in this following field that shows SAML IDP metadata file. And in some cases, your SAML engineering team may say that they don't generate a metadata file. That's okay. Using a sample that we've provided, you can hand write or hand edit a metadata file as well. That works. So once you've gone through these steps, you hit OK, and Tableau Server is now configured for SAML. However, before everything's hunky-dory, you need to make sure you test it. A couple of caveats that you want to be careful about. The location of the cert and the key and the metadata files has to be in a folder that Tableau Server's run as user has access to. The most common mistake we've seen during the beta program is that these files get saved on the desktop for the Tableau Server machine. And the desktop user that's logged into Tableau Server machine may not have the same permissions that the Tableau Server run as user has. So it's important to make sure that wherever you put these files, that the Tableau Server run as user has access to them. The easy thing to do is to create a SAML folder underneath the Tableau Server folder and make sure that all of the files, the certificate, the key, and also the metadata files are available in that particular folder. All right, so once you have all of this set up, and if your IDP is already configured appropriately, SAML should work. Couple of key things or key questions you may get from your SAML engineers is what attributes does Tableau Server require? So let's go ahead and open up the Tableau Server Online Help, where we actually walk you through the SAML requirements. So the key attribute that we depend on is an attribute called username. It's all lowercase and it's one word. And this particular attribute has to be has to be defined and consistent both on the Tableau Server side and the IDP side. And what the IDP would do as part of the authentication is select the user's username and provide that as a value field to this particular SAML attribute called username. Now, this particular attribute is customizable. So within Tableau Server, you can change the name of this attribute. So from username, you could, for example, change the attribute to GID as an example. And to change the attribute, it's a simple tab admin config command, where you would essentially set wgserver.saml.idp attribute.username to whatever username it is you want to set it to. Another thing your SAML engineering team might want to know is essentially what kind of bindings Tableau Server supports. The answer is HTTP post binding. That's the binding we support. And HTTP post binding is a pretty standard implementation in terms of a SAML integration. So the SAML team will care about knowing what kind of binding Tableau Server supports, which is HTTP post, knowing what kind of SAML attribute is required for Tableau Server, which is the username attribute, or whatever you and the SAML engineering team mutually agree on, but make sure that if you change it from username, that you change the Tableau Server configuration appropriately. Once again, the Tableau Server configuration dialog, you enable SAML, you provide the return URL, the entity ID, certificate, and key. That's sufficient for you to export the Tableau Server metadata file, and you provide that metadata file to your SAML engineering team. The SAML engineering team, in turn, will provide an IDP metadata file for you to use within Tableau Server, which you come back in here and specify. If your SAML engineering team doesn't provide you a metadata file, you can hand create one. But without a metadata file, the configuration for SAML will be incomplete and authentication will not work. Once you've done that, you hit OK, and the server, once the server restarts, you'll be able to go through and test out your SAML configuration. So to test the configuration, this time I'm going to use the Tableau desktop to connect to a Tableau Server instance that's configured for SAML. So I have a Tableau desktop 8.1 version open here, and I'm going to go ahead and sign into a server. Now to sign into a server, one of the things I'm going to do is specify the location or the Tableau Server URL that I typically access. In this case, I'm going to use an IP. You don't need to. You can use a host name, but I'm going to go ahead and connect to Tableau Server. So what's happening behind the scenes here is essentially Tableau Desktop has connected to Tableau Server, determined that Tableau Server is actually configured for SAML. So that initiates, on behalf of the desktop, the Tableau Server initiates an authentication process. It redirects Tableau Desktop to the IDP. In this particular example, I have Ping Federate configured as the identity provider, or the IDP. And what I'm seeing here is essentially Ping Federate's authentication mechanism. I have Ping Federate configured to use a couple of different adapters. One is either native authentication, or another adapter is an Active Directory adapter, where Ping Federate directly uses or connects to Active Directory and authenticates me against an Active Directory service. So let's go ahead and select my AD adapter. So here, Ping Federate is prompting me for my credentials, my AD credentials, in fact, because it is using the AD adapter and it's configured to authenticate against AD. So I provide my credentials for AD, and let's go ahead and sign in. So essentially, what's happened behind the scenes now is Tableau Server has contacted the IDP. The IDP has essentially prompted me for an authentication for my AD credentials, and once I provided those, the IDP has authenticated me. It was successful. The authentication was successful, and essentially that communication then goes over to Tableau Server. Now Tableau Server has logged me in successfully. Now from here on, I could essentially go through the same process or same set of actions like publishing a workbook or doing any other server-related activity that I might do. I am authenticated to Active Directory via the Ping Federate identity provider in this particular case, and my SAML configuration works. As far as configuring Tableau Server goes, it's a fairly simple set of steps that you have to go through that we've talked about in the video. But as part of the troubleshooting process, you may have to look at WG server log files and look at what's actually happening behind the scenes. You could turn on debug logging if you wish, wgserver.log.level, and set that to debug. And when you set that to debug, we will essentially log all of the SAML requests and assertions that we generate as well, to give you a little bit more insight on what's happening with the requests. So in cases where SAML is not working as you expect, check to make sure that your configuration is right. Check to make sure that you're using a private key. Check to make sure that your metadata files are good. That is, they're not corrupt if you hadn't edited them. And make sure you take a look at the log files, the WG server log file in particular, and also feel free to turn on debug logging in your test environment to check out what's actually going on behind the scenes if SAML is not working as you expect. So to conclude the SAML configuration video for Tableau Server 8.1, what are some of the key things to take away? One is that as a Tableau administrator, you need to reach out to your IT team or your SAML engineering team to collaborate with them to get this configuration going. The online documentation provides some good guidance in terms of things that you need to prepare for, and those are also included in this video. So make sure you plan out your SAML configuration with your SAML engineering team and IT team. Having all of the prerequisites ready makes the configuration easier for you. Well, that's it for this video. Have fun configuring SAML, and hope you enjoy a lot of the new features we have in Tableau Server 8.1. Thank you.